Kitty, the modern American young woman who loves freedom, music, and dancing, is the protagonist of our story today. Her murder shocked American society. Let's find out how it happened. Catherine Kitty Genovese was born on July 7, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York, to parents of Italian descent. Her father, Vincent Genovese, managed the Bay Ridge Coat Supply Company, and her mother, Rachel Genovese, was a homemaker. The family lived in a working-class Irish and Italian neighborhood in Brooklyn. From a young age, Kitty was known for her positive energy and love of life. She was nicknamed the Chatterbox and was well known at school for her love of English and music classes. After high school, her family moved to New Canaan, Connecticut, but Kitty chose to stay in New York City, which she loved. She worked various jobs, from secretary to waitress, hostess, and bartender, eventually becoming the manager at Eve's Bar in Hollis, Queens. She worked hard in both morning and evening shifts to earn a good salary. Her goal was to save enough money to open her own Italian restaurant, freeing her from the toil of working for others. She valued independence and, as a self-sufficient woman, would often tell her father when he looked for a husband for her, "No man can support me because I make more than he does." In 1963, she moved with her friend to an apartment in Kew Gardens, Queens. Her life was happy, filled with work, dreams, and ambitions. But would this last? Would she achieve her dream of opening the restaurant? Unfortunately, no. Bad luck brought her face to face with a bloodthirsty criminal, making her one of his victims. On the day of the crime, Kitty left her job around 3 a.m. on March 13, 1964. She was eagerly heading home to celebrate her first anniversary with her friend Mary. The two friends had planned a small party to reminisce about their shared memories and plan for the future. Kitty parked her car at the railway station and began walking to her nearby apartment, unaware that Winston Mosley was lurking nearby. Mosley, a modest 28-year-old man who worked in database management at a hardware company, had left his wife and two sons asleep at home and set out around 1 a.m. to find a victim, carrying a serrated hunting knife in his pocket. He had been driving around the streets and neighborhoods for a long time, and by 3 a.m., he was feeling desperate as he hadn't found his prey for the night. Suddenly, he spotted a young woman with dark hair getting into a red Fiat. He quickly turned around and followed her, stopping when she did. The Kew Gardens were quiet at this late hour, with the pharmacy and cafe closed and the apartment windows dark as most people were asleep. In this stillness, Kitty headed to her apartment but suddenly heard footsteps behind her. Sensing danger, she quickened her pace, prompting Mosley, who was following her, to speed up as well. She started to run, her heart pounding with fear, but Mosley caught up and managed to stab her. As he did, she cried out, "Oh my God!" and began to sob. A neighbor named Robert Moser saw what was happening and shouted, "Leave the girl alone!" This confused and startled Mosley, giving Kitty a chance to try to walk to her apartment while bleeding, but she collapsed at the stairs. Mosley sat in his car, initially afraid to get out, but when he didn't hear police or ambulance sirens, he decided to finish what he had started. This wasn't his first experience with killing. He got out of his car, found Kitty bleeding and in pain, and as soon as she saw him, she was terrified. He stabbed her several times and then brutally raped her despite her injuries and attempts to resist. Afterward, he stole $49 from her wallet and left her barely breathing. A neighbor and Kitty's friend, Sophie Farrar, heard the commotion and rushed to help. Sophie held Kitty's hands and tried to comfort her. Around 4 a.m., over half an hour after the attack, a neighbor named Ross called the police, who arrived with the ambulance. Kitty was taken to Queens General Hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries. At the morgue, her friend Mary identified her body. The coroner's report indicated that Kitty had been stabbed 13 times and had numerous defense wounds. In reality, Kitty had defended herself and might have survived if help had arrived before the killer's second attack. 6 days after the crime, Mosley was arrested for a robbery. During his confession, he admitted to killing 3 women: 24-year-old Annie Johnson, 15-year-old Barbara Kralik, and the subject of our article, Kitty Genovese. He also confessed to committing numerous robberies and rapes. Mosley was tried and sentenced to death on June 15, 1964. However, his sentence was later reduced to 20 years. In 1968, he escaped from prison while undergoing a minor surgery at Meyer Hospital in New York. On the way back to prison, he attacked his guard, took his weapon, and fled. During his escape, Mosley broke into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Matthew, held them at gunpoint, and stayed there for 3 days. When he sensed the police closing in, he took their car and continued his escape after raping Mrs. Matthew. In another incident, while being pursued by the police, he took a woman and her daughter hostage in their home for 2 hours before surrendering without harming them. His failed escape attempt added 15 years to his prison sentence. During his incarceration, he studied and earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology from Niagara University. Mosley became eligible for parole but was repeatedly denied due to his notorious reputation and the severity of his crimes. Despite his persistent applications over the years, he remained incarcerated until his death on March 28, 2016, at the age of 81. 2 weeks after Kitty's murder, Martin Gansberg wrote an article titled "The 37 Who Saw the Murder and Did Not Call the Police." This eye-catching title sparked widespread debate and discussion about the disturbing apathy surrounding the event, where 37 respectable men witnessed a man kill a woman without taking any action. In 1968, John Darley and Bibb Latané developed a psychological and social concept known as the Genovese syndrome or the bystander effect, inspired by the indifferent responses to Kitty's murder. The bystander effect suggests that people are more likely to help when they are alone compared to when they are in the presence of others. This led to the birth of psychological studies on helping behavior. Additionally, numerous TV programs and books were produced about the story of the witnesses who did nothing. Some TV programs in 1965 depicted the brutal beating Kitty endured. Several songs were composed portraying Kitty's murder and the lack of intervention, and the events were dramatized in a film in 1999. In 2006, a documentary was produced detailing the crime and its circumstances. Many considered Kitty's murder to symbolize the cruelty and apathy towards human life in large cities, particularly in New York City. Kitty's murder also contributed to the U.S. adopting the 911 emergency system in 1968. Because at the time of her murder, contacting the police was time-consuming, which might have delayed the call for help. For this reason, this case was dubbed the crime that changed America. Regardless of the number of witnesses, the truth remains that Kitty was a victim of a senseless murder simply because she returned home late from work and happened to cross paths with a man who enjoyed killing, particularly women, as they were perceived to be weaker and less resistant. Thus, Kitty was killed, along with her dream of opening a restaurant serving Italian cuisine.